Hi, welcome back to another video. This is the first haunted doll that I ever created, and she sits in my office even today. Recently, as I was looking at her, I realized that over the years, my process for making dolls has been getting more and more complicated. So in today's video, I just want to show you some very simple techniques that you can do. I am going to show some more advanced things too, but those are all optional. That first doll that I made only had paint on her face. I didn't do anything with her hair or her clothes. These are the dolls that we'll be working with today. And rather than show a big reveal at the end, I'm going to go through them one at a time and reveal them as I finish them. So stick with me so you don't miss any of it, and hopefully you get inspired and try it on your own. Okay, let's do this little girl first. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all of their clothes and take off their hair. You don't have to do that. You can just leave it on there if you want. Most of these dolls come with a hole in their head, but she doesn't, so we can't access her eyes, so we won't even change them out. Now, I'm going to dye all of their clothes all at once, so they're all going to get the same treatment. And to do that, I'm using this RIT Dye More Synthetic, because most of their clothes are synthetic, though I think some of them are probably cotton. Anyway, you all know, if you've seen some of my videos, that black dye a lot of times does not end up black. It ends up dark purple or dark blue or dark green. Go ahead and pause the video. Put a comment down below what color you think these clothes are going to turn. Are they going to be dark blue, dark purple, dark green, black, or maybe something else? And again, this is a step that you don't have to do. You don't have to dye the clothes. You don't have to change them at all. You can just leave their original clothes. Just do a little bit of paint on their face and you'll get a beautifully haunted doll. Now while the clothes are drying, let's go ahead and paint her. And I'll put a list of the colors that I'm using down in the comments below. But I'm using burnt umber, black, moss green, white, and yellow ochre. So I'm going to paint her using really watered down white. We're just going to do a wash over her. This is going to lighten her complexion, make her look a little bit pale. And while it's still wet, we're going to dab it off with a paper towel. And I'm dabbing, not wiping. You can see I'm wiping it out of the eyes, but I'm just dabbing everywhere because we kind of want it uneven. That makes it look more interesting. And then we're just going to let that dry before we go to the next step. Okay, with that dry, it's now time for some washes of different colors. I'm going to start with the dark gray, and you don't have to have any artistic skill to do this, really. I'm just blotching it here and just kind of letting it sit for a second and then wiping it off. Now let's do some green in some places. Now the longer you let it sit, the more color it's going to put into it. And then we're just going to dab it off with the paper towel, like always. Now, as I'm painting her, the paint was so drippy and it just kept running down. And it actually inspired me to change my mind about the direction that I'm going with her. So I'm going to use gravity to our advantage here. So I have her sitting up, and I'm just going to use, again, the very watery paint, and I'm going to just let it drip down her face however it wants. I will dab it off after a moment, but I just kind of want to let nature happen. This is not any skill coming from my artistic ability. This is just gravity happening. And then, of course, I'm going to let it dry, and once it's dry, it's a lot lighter, and I kind of don't like some of the hard lines that are there, so I'm going to disguise them by just blotching some pale white on there. So this is just, it's white that's not as thinned as it was before, but I'm just going to put it on there and add a few other details that I want to add, like darkening around the eye sockets and the lips, and dab it off with a paper towel. Now I want a little bit more control about the fade around the eyes, so I'm going to show you a cool tip. So I've cleaned my paintbrush in water and then painted it on a paper towel to dry it off a little bit. And now as I touch it around the edges, I'm doing the same thing that the paper towel would do. I'm actually sucking up some of the paint into the paintbrush, and that helps you kind of fade around the edges. And now we just finish her up with some specific details. I'm just going to give her some black lips. I've added some black around her eyes. And you'll see that I don't bother cleaning off the paint that's actually on her eyeballs. That kind of adds a cool effect to it. So next, we're going to put her hair and her clothes back on. So she had this blonde wig originally, and it was too small for her head at the time. I think I'm going to put on a different wig. So this is what it would look like. I did lightly spray a little bit of black spray paint over it to try to make it look dingy, and it's fine. I just don't like this hairstyle. So I actually have the wig, the original wig from my Banshee doll before I made my own wig, and we'll put that on her instead. Okay, with that done, let's see how she turned out. If you guessed that the dyed clothes would come out black, then you are correct. If you think you're seeing purple, that might be because some of the clothes started out as red. But she's nice and creepy, and she's got pretty hair, and I really like her. She's very simply done. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Here's our next young lady. She's got a hat and stuff. I'm going to take all her clothes and her hair off, and we'll start painting her. So for her paint, I'm going to kind of go down the road that I started to go down with her little sister before we let gravity take over. Just blotches of paint. I'm actually going to use slightly thicker paint, basically not as much water added in, and we'll put it in there. And when I dab it, I'm going to just dab very lightly so that I leave some of the texture of the paper towel left on her face. By the way, you can also use a sponge to do the same thing and leave a spongy texture behind. And then it's just a process of putting blotchy colors, letting them sit for a second, dabbing them off. It's the same thing over and over that you've seen me do. And I'm using a lot of different colors. Again, they're all these earth tones, the moss green, burnt umber, yellow ochre. One thing that I want, though, is I want her to have a kind of foggy eyeball. And I had done that on one of my older dolls in a previous video, but I used a special product. It was like a gel matte medium, which is expensive. Most people don't have it. So I'm going to show you a way to get a foggy eyeball with something that you're bound to have. Here she is with her paint all dry. You can see how splotchy and just haphazard it is. When you step back, it looks amazing. To make her eye, we're just going to use regular white glue. Now, I'm going to push this around to get it right in the right spot. I'll scoop some of this out. This glue does dry clear, so I actually had to do 4 coats. But after this first coat, it's just a drop of glue right in the middle, and then you let it dry before putting on the next coat. So now I'm going to put her hair back on and her clothes back on, and that could be enough, but I wanted to add one little extra piece of fanciness. Now this is not necessary, but I have these crow wings that I got off of a little crow prop, and I want to just glue them onto her back. So I'm going to use some hot glue and stick them in place. Once that's dry, let's see how she turned out. Again, she would be fine even if I did one part of this, just the paint, or just the eye, or just the clothes. Okay, let's go a completely different direction for our next one. Okay, this girl I bought at a yard sale, and I bought her because of her eyes. They're so creepy. I think they're sun-faded or something. They're pretty gross. Anyway, after I bought her, I realized that she's a little bit different because she's a vinyl doll, not a porcelain doll. Now, what that means is a porcelain doll, I'm not able to take anything away. But with a vinyl doll, I can actually cut into her. So I'm going to take advantage of that, and we're just going to try something I've never done before. So I've sketched with a pencil around a part of her face that I want to just cut off. I'm using a sharp X-Acto knife and being very careful and slow, and I'm just going to go through and cut through this and remove it. Now there's a lot of things that I can do. I saw a cool doll on season 2 of Wednesday on Netflix where she had a chunk of her, or she had a broken face. She was porcelain. They put it back together and kind of sat high on it like this. I could do that. That's pretty cool. I think I'm going to try something else. So now I'm going to actually use my 3D printer and print off a free skull model that I found online. And I think this should be about the right size as her actual skull. And I'm going to paint that skull to look like a real bone skull. I'm not going to show that process here because I have a whole video on it, so the link will be below or up in the corner also. I did have to add some extra cuts on her head to fit the skull down inside, and the skull had a hard time fitting initially because her eyes have this weird lump in the back. And so I needed to just edit the 3D print before I painted it, rather than mess with, a 3D model and wait for it to reprint and everything. I just took my Dremel tool and grinded away the part of the skull where her eye is going to be. And so you can see now it fits a lot better. And of course it looks all gross and ugly, but that's never going to be seen by anyone. So I also ground off some of the chin so that it would sit right. Okay, here's my finished painted skull. And I'm going to go ahead and insert it into her head, and then I will use hot glue to glue the seam shut. And it's time to put her hair back on, but I don't like how bright her hair is. This is hers, the kind of strawberry blonde one in the front. So I'm using some black paint and just from a very far distance, just spraying a little bit. I'm doing this on all of them just to kind of take away a little bit of the shine, take away a little bit of the newness of it. So now I'm getting her dressed, and this is all I'm going to do to her. I realize that I haven't done any paint on her or anything, and I want to kind of separate her skin from her, the skull a little bit. So once I get all her clothes on, I'm going to paint just a little bit of burnt umber along the edge just to kind of show the edge of the break. So her hair has these cloth ribbons in them. I could have taken them off and dyed them, but instead I think I'm just going to replace them with some black ribbon. Okay, let's get this hair on her head and see how she turned out. This one's creepy just because of the skull, but it's cool that just one change, well, I guess I did the clothes as well, could make her creepy. I think that if I would have just kept her face as it was and just made her clothes dark, she would have been just as creepy. Okay, I hope you're still with me because we're about to do the one that is my favorite from this group. When I saw this carol singer at the thrift shop, I knew I had to get her. I had an idea as soon as I saw this that I'm so excited to try out. All right, let's start off like we do with the others. Get her hair off and her clothes off, and we'll start painting. I'm going to start in a familiar way with a white wash that I dab off, keeping some texture. But instead of browns and yellows, I'm going to go with some cool colors like blue. So I have this sky blue with a bunch of white added in. And I'm going to do the same treatment of putting paint on in strategic places or random places and then dabbing it off. But with these colors, so blue, I'm going to use red, purple. It should give it a different feeling than the ones that are all earth tone. And at times I feel like it's a little bit too saturated, a little bit too bright, so I go over it with some splotches of gray, and it kind of kicks it back a little bit. I have a specific pose in mind for this one, and I think that we'll probably see her more from the side than from the front, so I spent some time painting the side also. And then some final touch-ups of adding in some lipstick. In this case, it's pale bluish purple lips, and darkening the eyes. And speaking of eyes, you'll notice she doesn't have any eyeballs. That's because I took them out, and I want to build some custom ones for her. It's a little bit more advanced, but I wanted it to look like her eyes have rolled back, so I'm going to try something I've never done before. I'm going to cut off about ½ inch, 3/4 of an inch of red yarn, and then I'm going to deconstruct it. I'm going to take it apart all the way through to get to the finest little threads, and these will look like blood vessels. And then I've got this little mold here that I can make hemispheres, and I'm going to just put the little red threads just in the bottom half of them. Then I mix up some 2-part epoxy with white pigment in it, and I pour that in and let it sit overnight. And now I can pop them out, and you see the blood vessels just down on one side. So let's go ahead, let's pick the 2 best ones and put them inside our doll. And I've had some trouble in the past trying to get the eyeballs in and balance them on my finger, so I tried this trick that worked so well. I used a tiny bit of double-sided tape so I could stick it to my fingertip, and then it doesn't fall off and I can place it exactly where I need to. And I'll just use a touch of hot glue and tack it into place, and then put a bunch of hot glue all around it to keep them in securely. Okay, I need to make a quick change to this doll. I'd like her head to tilt up, or tilt back like this, but she is very stuffed. You can see she's just splitting at the seams if I'm not careful. So I'm going to actually strategically cut her open and remove some of her stuffing. And I'm using needle nose pliers and just pulling some out, and I'll just check periodically to see if I can bend her back yet. And rather than sewing her, I'm just going to use hot glue to seal the incision, and I'll squeeze it together with some pliers. Notice I'm holding the head back as I do that, because I'm hoping that as I tighten this, it will also kind of just pull the head back by itself. She needs one more accessory, and to make this, I'm going to start with some craft wire. I've got a length here, and I fold it in half. I'm going to twist it up, and to do that, I've put a hook in my drill, and I'm going to hook the loop on one side. The other side, I'm just going to clamp in these vice grips, and then I'm going to drill it. And this gives me a much sturdier piece of wire. So now I'm going to spray paint it black, and we'll move on to the next part. So I've got 2 kinds of material here of fabric. I've got some sheer black and then some black tulle. And we're going to put this on the wire and turn this into the possessing spirit. So with a little tiny bit of hot glue, I'm going to wrap the black sheer fabric tightly at first. And then it will get looser and looser as we get down towards the end. And then I'm going to start folding it in on itself and using little dots of hot glue to kind of make it like a rose. And I basically want this to feel like a black mist. And so I now take a thin piece of the black tulle, glue it at the tight tip, and then loosely wrap it around, tacking it in certain places. There is our spiritual cloud. So I got her dressed, and now it's time to install the cloud. I'm going to take the loose end of the wire and stick it right down in her head. And using hot glue, I'm going to glue it to the back of her head, and it'll just float like this. Now it's time to glue her wig back on, and we'll see how she turned out. Oh, one other thing. I'm going to use a doll stand to hold her up so it looks like she's floating. So let's take a look at that. So I said she was my favorite, and I don't know, what do you all think? Which one is your favorite from this group? Hey, thanks again for joining me today. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed these dolls, please leave a thumbs up, leave some hype so that YouTube knows this is something that other people might also like. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. And until next time, don't be bored. Be creative.